Welcome to the rise of Douglas Luiz. Douglas Luiz Suarez de Paulo, known to Villa fans as Dougie, is one of the most underrated central midfielders currently playing in the Premier League. There's been a massive rise in performance under Unai Emery for Douglas Luiz, and we're about to talk about the rise of Douglas Luiz. Coming from the Vasco da Gama Academy in Rio de Janeiro in 2017, Douglas Luiz signed for Manchester City. He then went on to have two loan spells with Girona, having not been able to get a work permit with Manchester City. In 2019, up steps Aston Villa under Dean Smith to take Dougie Luiz into the Premier League. And it has been a journey for Douglas Luiz at Aston Villa. There's been many highs and many lows, and we are about to embark on the rise and the performance of Dougie Luiz under Unai Emery. He has been one of Aston Villa's best players in recent years. In the 2022-23 season, he won Aston Villa's Supporters Player of the Season and Players Player of the Season. So let's talk about the journey that Douglas Luiz has been on at Aston Villa. In 2019-2020, this was Douglas Luiz's first season in the Premier League. It was Aston Villa's first season back in the Premier League, having risen through the Championship, through the playoffs, and he was sort of a deadline-ish boy, very late on in the season, made his debut against Bournemouth at home, scoring an absolute thunderbolt in our 2-1 loss to Bournemouth. In the first season in the Premier League under Dean Smith, he was really putting central midfield in a 4-3-3. That was the general formation that Dean Smith liked to play in. This season was then cut in half with COVID. So we had a COVID break. And after that COVID break, Dougie Luiz really set himself on being a catalyst to Aston Villa surviving in the Premier League. You can see the stats, the numbers of his average performances after COVID: 7.2, 7.1, 7.5. And he was one of the main reasons why Aston Villa survived on the last day. He came to Aston Villa with a lot of promise. There was a massive performance that he had for Girona against Real Madrid that got everybody's sort of licking their lips at what Dougie Luiz was about to produce in an Aston Villa shirt. His first season at Aston Villa was a good season. Villa really struggled in this season, and it was only the COVID break that really saved us. Some of his numbers from his very first season at Aston Villa: he scored 3 goals. He had a passing accuracy of 83%, 90 in his own half and 75 in the opposition half. So it was a decent first season for Douglas Luiz. Second season was a lot better for Aston Villa. Aston Villa were playing some really nice stuff at this stage. You can see his average season rating of 6.87 did increase, so he performed better. He scored no goals in that season, having 86% passing accuracy, 91 in his own half, 80 in the opposition half. The interceptions, 1.3. Tackles per game, 1.5. Next season was the season that Dean Smith got sacked and Steven Gerrard arrived again. It was another season where his stats were decent. They were better than the season before. He scored 2 goals and it was employed in a double pivot-ish, with the midfield having to actively act as fullbacks, and it was very disjointed, and it wasn't the greatest of seasons from Aston Villa. And then last season, partly to do with Gerrard, 12 games, and Unai Emery having around 28 games, this was where we started to see the the rise and the emergence of Douglas Luiz. A SOFA score rating for the season of 7.10. He was really employed into a double pivot, which was something that we haven't seen before at Aston Villa. So, what are the in possession responsibilities of a double pivot? The players in a double pivot must possess awareness and understanding of spaces and pressure, especially in central areas. Each needs to be constantly aware of the position of the midfield partner. They must never offer the same lines or occupy the same spaces. Both players must be comfortable in possession with a good passing range and ability to switch play. They should also be able to combine with short passes when under pressure and break lines into teammates further forward. Comfortable dropping into defence in the build-up phase. They should be able to turn and play off both feet. They should also be able to hide the ball from opponents, wriggle away and counter pressure. These two players operate mostly underneath the acting unit, so one has the license to support with the late forward runs. These can be made through well-timed off-field balls to penetrate into the penalty area, overlapping movements around wide players who have moved inside, or by driving forward with the ball. Often these runs come during transitions. What are the out-of-position responsibilities of a double pivot? One of the main responsibilities of the double pivot is winning the ball. They need to be able to ready to compete both in the air and on the ground for the first and second balls. The double pivot must provide protection for the centre-backs, and also the need to communicate well and be disciplined and organised enough to help maintain defensive block, knowing when to leave their slot to press or move out of cover of a wide player is also key. The double pivot's responsibility also includes supporting high press, delaying counter-attacks, locking the ball on side of the pitch, and curving runs to press forwards, press outwards are also important jobs. Remember what I've just said there. And now think about Douglas Luiz. Those phrases, those words of a player actively acting in a double pivot describe Dougie Luiz to a T. Douglas Luiz under Unai Emery has catapulted his game tenfold. I talk about when I was at the Villarreal Aston Villa pre-season friendly, and the communication with Dougie Luiz, the communication with Unai Emery during that game got me so excited. It was all about Douglas Luiz. Douglas Luiz getting his role, knowing his role, and getting the best out of Douglas Luiz is key to a fully functioning Aston Villa side. Douglas Luiz, for me, at the minute, under Unai Emery, is an absolute joy to watch. By far, Aston Villa's best player. By far. The awareness, the understanding, the vision, the education that he has had from Unai Emery has catapulted Douglas Luiz's game to a level that even I possibly didn't think we could see. So what we're going to see now is we are going to see Aston Villa's formation with Douglas Luiz in the Aston Villa team. Now, as you can see here, this is generally, well, this is how we set up against Wolves. Generally differs with the left back or the right back. But what we will see is the double pivot with Boubacar Kamara. Boubacar Kamara actively is the more defensive player in this double pivot. He's the player that sort of is working in this area. So we are working in this area here with Kamara actively, main focus on covering ground through here. His role doesn't really progress into an attacking area. But up steps Douglas Luiz now, who is now actively forward. We know that a double pivot, you cannot be on the same line. There's no point you being on the same line. If they do get to be on the same line, then it is up to both of them to communicate to move off that line. So when we're defending, we're probably sitting something similar to that. When we're attacking, we've got Douglas Luiz in this area here. Now, this area here now for me with Douglas Luiz is where we're starting to see, for me, the emergence of a top quality player. This season, under Unai Emery, we're starting to see Douglas Luiz make these type of runs and become more of an attacking central midfielder. I think this season we've seen Douglas Luiz breaking through that line in transition, becoming more of an actively attacking midfielder. But his role, for me, is of this. He's so key in piecing our whole play together. For me, he's the conductor of our team. When we play well, when he's got that zip, when he's finding space, there is no player for me in this Villa team as good as Douglas Luiz. But now what I want to show you is I really want to highlight to you now some of the screen grabs of what I found, how he's developing now into this top bracket player for Aston Villa. So as you can see on the screen now, we have got the passing networks of Douglas Luiz against Brighton. And when I'm talking about that spider diagram of him being the conductor in this team, you can really see his importance against Brighton. You can see here now that this sort of area of him conveying and looking at the space and what's around him and everything going through him and driving us forward, it was so key for me. And it just highlights that phrase that I've used about him being the conductor for Aston Villa. One of the other areas that I think he's really massively improved his game is the constant looking and surveying of the space that's in and around him. He's now starting to look where players are. You start to see really good central midfielders in the Premier League like Odegaard, Gomes, Declan Rice. They're always surveying and scanning the pitch. So they know that when that ball comes to them, they know that what is around them. And this screen grab here was a motion against Crystal Palace. And in this phase here, in this build-up with Pau Torres and Konsa, he's surveying, he's looking at his area, he's looking at where everybody is. And I think that's one of the biggest compliments that I could probably give him, that his game has improved with as well. It's his maturity and it's just knowing his surroundings, and that has also meant that his game has gone on tenfold as well. The next screen grab that I've got as well is he's now finding space at the right times and in the right moment. This was Duran's goal against Crystal Palace as well. It was the chest and the volley for Duran. But again, now we've got Douglas Luiz in acres of space, enable him to just do a nice little outside of the foot pass to Luca Dean. And again, Luiz in acres of space under no pressure whatsoever to be able to just manipulate the ball and move it where he wants to and be that conductor. It's absolutely fantastic to see. But his game doesn't stop there. Again, we can see space, awareness, a nice little slide through ball through the gap to Ollie Watkins, which sends Watkins on his way. We scored from this as well. So again, another beautiful little pass from Luiz, finding space, forward thinking, playing the ball forward. Absolutely beautiful to see. Again, the game doesn't stop here. Douglas Luiz under pressure, strong. His awareness to manipulate the ball from a player Once he rides this tackle, he's then got 3 Wolves players all around him trying to get the ball off him. He then plays a nice little ball into Moussa Diaby, and Aston Villa are on the breakaway. But as well, you can see the strength and just the bravery to pick up the ball, twist and turn. And it was a really great sight to see. And this is also something that I think he's improved his game massively. His ability to work in tight areas, to come out of tight areas, which then allow Aston Villa to transition onto the attack. Again, picking up the ball, surrounded by players, bursting forward, driving Aston Villa forward. Again, tight areas, tight spaces, bravery, head up, playing forward. And this also came from the goal when he was fouled against Brighton in the build-up to this goal. Another area of his game as well that I think has massively improved, we have the goal for Douglas Luiz against Brighton. Some of you will just think, okay, it was an easy goal. It was a bit of a tap-in. But the goal starts when John McGinn plays that through ball into Ollie Watkins. Douglas Luiz's first thought now is, how can I now get in and help support? He's on the back of the defender. His forward thought now is, how can I break through and be a threat in the opposition box? And then what we do see is that the ball comes to Douglas Luiz at the edge of the box and he scores a goal for Aston Villa. And the final point, he doesn't even look on penalties, which is absolutely remarkable. So those are all of the things that I have been massively impressed with Douglas Luiz. His game has come on leaps and bounds under when he's wearing a Villa shirt. And I just think he's an absolute fantastic footballer. He is a joy to watch. And he is my favourite player for Aston Villa. He's going to have a wonderful season for Aston Villa. He's already on 3 goals so far this season. He scored 6 last season. So with him on penalties, if Douglas Luiz can add goals to his game, then there is no way the Brazil national side can keep forgetting about Douglas Luiz. In my opinion, more goals to his game will get him in that Brazil squad. And I just wanted to talk about Douglas Luiz because I think the media, I think general football fans sleep on Douglas Luiz, but he is one of the best central midfielders in the Premier League. He is that good. And at 25 years of age, the kid's only going to get better under Unai Emery. We're already starting to see leadership qualities. He's already captained the Villa side as well. So he's got that string to his bow now as well. And I just think as a Villa fan, to be able to talk about a player like this, to be able to have seen a player's development, to be able to see how a player has adjusted from the kid that came with the dreadlocks on the opening day against Bournemouth to now be this central midfielder who is starting to be the complete package. I can't tell you how pleased and proud I am to watch Douglas Luiz. He is absolutely remarkable and I think he's fantastic. So Villa fans, let me know your thoughts on Douglas Luiz. Let me know how you feel about Douglas Luiz. But I think this episode was called for because I think he's that good and he needs to be spoke about more and more because he's a fantastic footballer and I absolutely love watching him. So if you are new to the channel, subscribe, drop this video a like. Up the Villa.